Joining us today, Rob Wittman. That's not me. That is Robert King Wittman, who goes by Bob. Bob is a highly decorated Federal Bureau of Investigation special agent who was assigned to the Philadelphia Field Division from 1988 to 2008. And as a result of some very specialized training that he received in art, antiques, jewelry, and gem identification, Bob served as the FBI's top investigator and coordinator in cases involving art theft and art fraud. And during his 20 years there at the FBI, he helped to recover more than $300 million worth of stolen art and cultural property, which resulted in the prosecution and conviction of numerous individuals. And in 2005, he was instrumental in the creation of the FBI's Rapid Deployment Art Crime Team, the ACT, and he was named the ACT's senior investigator, and he was responsible for instructing that newly formed team. And he was also instrumental in the recovery of a variety of different artifacts out there, from one of the original copies of the Bill of Rights to some famous Norman Rockwell paintings. But I'm going to cease there. I want to make sure we go right to Bob now and join him, welcome him to our program, and thank him for his service there in the FBI. Bob, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, Rob, it's great to be here, and it's great to finally speak to you. I've been watching your career for years. I just want to make sure that you can keep our name good and clean.
That's right, exactly. Believe me, I'm going to do all I can to make sure we're honoring the name Rob Wittman, and in your case, Bob. You go by Bob. Well, let me ask this. You spoke about that. Has anybody ever asked you, do you know Congressman Rob Wittman?
No, no one's ever asked me that. It's funny. I guess I've watched your career. I know you've been out there for a while, but no, I never. Nobody's ever asked me that question. I guess because I'm Bob and you're Rob. Might be a different thing. And you have a different middle name. You
That's
got
it.
The J, I got the K.
That's right. Robert K and Robert J.
When it comes to Wittmans, there's a lot of Whitmans with the Walt Whitman name,
Yes.
But when it comes to us, Wittman, there's not many of us. So it is interesting.
It is. It's a very small community of folks that have the Wittman. I have to remind folks of that because I'm sure that you, like me, have had our names misspelled a number of times, and I try to politely correct folks and say no H and two T's, and
that's exactly it.
And there are.
I always say no H and two T's.
That's it. That's exactly what I say. Of course, there are some Whitmans out there, too, that put two N's at the end of it. So I've seen all kinds of spelling variations of the Wittman name, and I'm sure you've come across the same variations as I have. But, wow, you have had an extraordinary career there with the FBI in investigating some really amazing cases. And I just wanted to get you to reflect. Give us a little bit about your background and what attracted you to become an FBI agent, what your interests were, and especially as it took you into the realm of art theft, and kind of give us your perspective there. And gosh, the list of cases that you investigated and some of the art that you recovered is just mind-boggling, and the ability to travel around the world to do that. Give us a little bit of your perspective on your career there. And I know, gosh, we could do another full segment in the program on that, but just give us a little bit of your background and some of the things that in your career.
Right, well, sure. I grew up in Baltimore, not far from your district, and basically, my parents were in the antiques business, which gave me a little bit of a step up when I got in the FBI. I didn't go in the FBI in 1988 with the idea of being in the art and antiques business. I actually was watching shows like Miami Vice, and Hill Street Blues, and I thought it would be really neat to be on a cigarette boat, wearing a white suit down in Miami Harbor, running around Miami Beach. But that didn't quite work out for me, because they sent me right to Philadelphia, which, of course, doesn't have a whole lot of cigarette boats in the harbor. So I was put right on a interstate trafficking stolen property squad. And basically, one of the first cases that came through was a art theft from the Rodin Museum in Philadelphia. And so because none of the other agents, who were all hard-bitten, fedora-wearing, cigar-smoking FBI agents at the time, were not that interested in art, and I was the new guy, I got the case. And as a result, worked with another seasoned agent, and we were able to recover that piece. And from there on out, basically, because I had the background, they kind of used my background and gave me the training. So I went to the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia for a year of fine art training, and then gemology school in Santa Monica, and diamond school there as well. And as a result of all the training, I started getting into it. But throughout the years, it's always the old saying in law enforcement or anything else, it's better to be lucky than smart. So you have to make your own luck and hope things work out.
Well, you certainly have done more than that. I'll tell you, in your career, worked hard and have had the opportunity to investigate some really intriguing cases. And as I look at the major recoveries that you've had during your career, wow, some pretty amazing things there. I know there was a theft of one of the original 14 copies of the Bill of Rights that was stolen by a Union soldier. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that was an interesting case. What happened there was in 1865, as Sherman's troops were coming back north from Atlanta, they stopped in Raleigh, North Carolina, and at one point they took the state capital, basically made North Carolina capitulate. And one of the troopers from Indiana went into the state capitol, and he took the Bill of Rights, the actual Bill of Rights that was sent by George Washington to the state of North Carolina in 1789 to be ratified. He basically rolled it up and took it with him. It's about a 4-foot-high document done on vellum, which is animal skin, signed by John Adams, and he took it back to Indiana, and he sold it for $5.
Wow.
Back in 1865. And there it stayed in Indiana all the way up till 2003. When we got wind that a group was trying to sell that piece for $4 million to the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. The governor of Philadelphia then contacted the governor of North Carolina. They decided that this is a piece that really does belong to the people. And as a result, we started an undercover investigation where I acted as a philanthropist to go pay for the $4 million. And we were able to lure the piece into a White Shoe Center City law office in Philadelphia, where we were able to retrieve that and make arrests on the persons who were trying to sell it.
Wow!
And so, when I joined the FBI, I did a salute, and I signed up, and we did a oath to the Constitution, to uphold the Constitution. But I never thought I'd actually be holding it in my hands at that moment. So it was interesting.
That's pretty amazing. Gosh, 140 years later to be able to recover that had to be a really, really proud moment in your career there to be able to accomplish that.
Well, it's a combination of a lot of people working together. I mean, we had the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Carolina. We had agents in North Carolina who had done background investigation. We had other agents in Philadelphia. It's funny, these cases happen, and you see them on TV and that type of thing, and you think that this one investigator is doing all this, but really it's a team. It's always a team of people working together. And so it's never a one-man operation. It takes many chefs, to build those cakes.
Well, absolutely, Bob. I know we have the honor of dealing with our special agents in charge in the 1st Congressional District, which we have the Manassas Field Office and the Richmond Field Office. So we get to work with them on a number of issues there, and they do a great job, as you said, not just within the FBI, but also across the spectrum. FBI does a great job in working with our state law enforcement agencies, our local law enforcement agencies. So as you said, it's a great effort there in teamwork to be able to crack these difficult cases. There are a couple of other interesting cases that you also were involved with. One was, we all know the famous U.S. artist Norman Rockwell. We've seen the Saturday Evening Post paintings that he had done, and I know that there was a theft from a private gallery in Minneapolis. Tell us a little bit about that recovery and what you went through to recover the artwork that was stolen there, those famous Rockwells.
Yeah, that was the largest recovery of a number of Rockwell paintings at one given time. And what happened there was, back in the late 70s, believe it or not, 7 Norman Rockwell paintings were taken from this gallery in Minneapolis. They were on display. And they were gone. They were gone for a long, long time, till 2001, in fact. And we got wind of 2 of them that we found being sold at an auction house and dealer in Philadelphia. And then from there, we were able to trace back that there were 3 more down in Rio de Janeiro, Teresópolis, Brazil.
Wow.
So in order to recover those, we had to do what we call an MLAT request, which is a mutual legal assistance treaty request with the country of Brazil to ask for help from their government and their prosecutors to go after the paintings. And it just so happened at that time in 2001, Congress had just passed and ratified the treaty with the Brazilian government. So this was the first time that law enforcement in the United States actually went to Brazil and asked for help from their government. And ultimately, we were able to recover these 3 paintings. 2 of them from, actually all 3 were from Boys Life magazine, the Boy Scout magazine. Mm-hmm. These were all the covers of the Boys Life magazine. One from 1976, which actually at that time showed or painted the Edison, New Jersey Boy Scout troop. And across the way, in the back of the painting, you could see the 2 twin towers of the World Trade Center that were actually in the painting. Wow. And, of course, we recovered these in December 2001, only 3 months after the attack in New York at the World Trade Center, which knocked the Trade Centers down. Wow. Interestingly enough, when we did there was a press conference, which was attended by and actually run by the U.S. Attorney at the time, who was Pat Meehan, who, by the way, is the congressman now from the district I'm in Pennsylvania. You might know him.
I know Pat well. Pat's a great guy.
Yeah, Pat pointed out these World Trade Centers in the back of the painting. When you see him, tell him I said hello.
I will definitely do that, Bob. But Pat's a great friend. He and I played on the congressional baseball team together. So.
Oh, did you?
Yes,
okay.
he did.
Yeah, I don't know if Pat's any good at baseball, but
he is. He still has some athletic prowess there too, as well as his prosecutorial prowess. So he's a good guy. A great guy. Wow, what an interesting case there. And again, you point out too, where it's the it's the U.S. attorneys too that help in that. It's not only getting the evidence as an investigator, but also making sure that you bring that case to prosecution. So it's really is a team effort in order to accomplish that. That's pretty neat stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty neat stuff.
Now, I talk about these cases and a number of other cases, Rob, in my book Priceless, How I Went Undercover to Rescue the World's Stolen Treasure. I wrote that in 2010.
Oh, wow.
It came out, it was by Random House, and it's available on Amazon and whatnot. It's basically a memoir of my career through 2008 when I retired. My new book, called The Devil's Diary, which came out last year, is it's a book about a recovery I did in 2013. Which was for the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And in that book, we talked about the recovery of the 400-page handwritten diary of Alfred Rosenberg.
Oh, wow.
Rosenberg was Hitler's chief civil scientist. He's basically the guy who created Hitler. He's the one who turned Hitler into Hitler in some respects. Because when Hitler met him in 1919, basically he was just a corporal. He had just come out of the German army, had no real thoughts about philosophy. Rosenberg is the guy who came up with all those ideas. The Aryan nation, the idea of the Holocaust itself, the rise of the socialist movement in Germany. So he was the philosopher who created that. And he wrote this 400-page diary between 1936 and 1945, which ultimately was stolen by one of the prosecutors at the Nuremberg trials. So that piece was missing all these years, and we recovered it in 2013 through my new company, which is Robert Wittman Incorporated, where we were doing an investigation for the Holocaust Museum. So that book talks about the rise of Rosenberg's rise of Nazi Germany, the prosecutor himself who stole the piece, who was a Holocaust not sympathy. He was a Holocaust individual who had gotten away from Germany, a Jewish lawyer who left Germany and went back to do the prosecution. So that's my new book.
Wow. I tell you, that's a valuable document. I can imagine, too, the history lessons that we learned through how, as you said, Hitler became Hitler, and Rosenberg influence there has got to be a very, very both revealing and compelling. So that's definitely a book that I'm gonna have to put on my must read list, and we'll go to Amazon, or I know Amazon also has Audible. So if you like books on tape, I'm sure you'll be able to access it there too. So that's
both are on tape. The first one, Priceless, was a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, wow!
And that's out there. And then the new one is international bestseller. It's in 26 languages at this point. So it's all over the world at this point.
That's great. Well, I know our listeners will
have our name out all over the world.
You are. You're doing the Rob Wittman name proud. That is fantastic. Well, listen, Bob, tell me about this. There's some other really interesting cases you had. You also were part of recovering Geronimo's war bonnet. And as we all know, Geronimo was the Native American Apache medicine man, and he had a big eagle feather war bonnet. Tell us about that.
Well, the case here is interesting because Geronimo actually didn't wear a war bonnet. He was an Apache, so he had just one feather. I mean, it wasn't the thing he would do.
Right.
Well, what happened was in I believe it was 1909 or 1907, Oklahoma's territory became a state. And at that ceremony, at the very end, just before it became a state, all the Indian nations, Native American nations, got together and did a dance. They did a week-long powwow in Oklahoma. And Geronimo was invited. At the time, he was a prisoner of war. He was at Fort Sill, and he was actually a prisoner there. He was invited to come to the last powwow to dance as the leader of all the nations. And President Teddy Roosevelt, honored the request and said he would let him do it. And he sent a Texas Ranger with Geronimo to accompany him to the last powwow in Oklahoma. Well, at that dance, he was given a buckskin outfit, moccasins, and this war bonnet to wear for his dance. This was basically a Comanche outfit that was given to him by supposedly one of his wives, who was a Comanche. So he wore this outfit. He danced. There's newspaper reports of how at the very end, after 7 days of this powwow, he was the last one up. He was in his 80s at that point, 80-some years old. And he got up and danced, and the whole nation stopped. Everyone stopped talking. Everyone stopped, just to watch Geronimo do this dance in this buckskin outfit in this war bonnet.
Wow.
So as a result, after it was over, he went back to Fort Sill, and he gave the whole regalia to the Texas Ranger, who actually went with him because of the respect they had for each other. And that Texas Ranger then, it went down through his family all the way to 2000, where a attorney in Atlanta actually had inherited the war bonnet. Well, he decided, because of certain family situations and new younger wives, that type of thing, that he needed money. So he decided he wanted to sell this eagle-feathered war bonnet for $1.2 million. Wow. And we got wind of that, started an undercover operation because your listeners may know it's illegal to sell eagle feathers in the United States. At the time they were protected, and they still are. You can't sell or do anything financially with eagle feathers. You can gift them to a museum, something of that nature, but you can't sell them. And so this individual was interested in selling this war bonnet for $1.2 million. It was made of eagle feathers. So we did an undercover operation. We contacted him. I acted as a buyer to sell the pieces in Europe, overseas, and we negotiated for the sale. Ultimately, he came to Philadelphia, brought the war bonnet with him, and was then arrested, and the war bonnet was seized. It's since gone back now to the tribe. And as I said, the war bonnet has been identified as eagle feather. Now, here's the interesting thing. We're not necessarily, we being the FBI at the time, we're not necessarily in the eagle feather business. It's not what we were looking into. More like drugs, that type of thing. But what was interesting is I contacted this individual, and he's an attorney. And I said to him at one point, I said, well, it's probably a problem to sell these. He said, oh, absolutely it is. And he sent me a copy of the law. Literally FedExed me a copy of the law. And I said to him, well, why don't you, donate it? And he said, no, I want the money. Oh, wow. So we gave him every opportunity to do the right thing. And yet he insisted on the money. So a lot of times, greed is what creates the situation in all these cases.
Yeah, I know, and I'm sure that's the bad part of human nature that gets revealed as you investigate these. Bob, we have just a few minutes left. I did want to get you to comment on one other case. We had on earlier Vice Admiral Ted Carter, who is the superintendent of the United States Naval Academy. And I know that the Tiffany presentation sword, and I'll talk a little bit about that, it was stolen from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1932. It's an 1862 Tiffany presentation sword that was awarded to Admiral John Lorimer Worden for his heroic command aboard the USS Monitor during its historic Civil War battle with CSS Virginia, better known as the Merrimack. So tell us a little bit about that investigation here in the few moments we have left.
Yeah, that was a spring-off investigation. And very interesting because it was a very historic sword. It's probably the most valuable, the most valuable naval presentation sword in existence. The Army and the Navy both have presentation swords that were given to generals, especially during the Civil War. But this one, made by Tiffany, is considered the most valuable naval one. As you said, it was given to John Worden after the Battle of the Monitor, the Merrimack, and Hampton Roads. At that point, even though that battle was kind of a standoff, the Union was looking at it as if it was a victory. Because by 1862, the Union didn't have many victories at that point.
Yes.
So it was considered a victory of sorts. Worden was the only individual who was actually wounded because he was looking through the sights, the sights on the ship, on the ironclad, and a shell went off and blinded him. Some of the fragments went into his eyes. So he was in the hospital, and Abraham Lincoln actually visited him in the hospital. So the New York State Legislature gave him this Tiffany Civil War sword at the time. It was valued at over $2,000 at the time. But you can imagine in 1862 a sword like that at $2,000, what it would be made of.
Yes.
Well, in 1932, it was stolen right off the wall in the Naval Academy, in the actual Warden Room. There's a room there at the Naval Academy named the Warden Room.
Yes.
And there's Warden Field as well. The sword was presented to them in the early 1900s by Worden and his son, because Worden was actually made the commandant, too, of the Naval Academy at one point, around 1870. And this family had this piece from 1932 on. It was taken up by one of the plebes who basically was drummed out of the Naval Academy.
Oh, my goodness.
He flunked out, and his last act was to take the sword with him, as well as the sword belt that was there at the Academy. And it was actually reported by the sergeant at arms at the time, but they never were able to recover it. Well, we did another case in the late 1990s, early 2000s, involving some individuals who were antiques dealers on the Antiques Roadshow, the famous PBS series.
Yes.
And these guys were committing frauds. This is another chapter in my book. These guys were committing frauds on the show itself. What they were doing is they were having pieces brought in by their friends, identifying them and getting them on TV. And basically these pieces were actually owned by them themselves.
Wow.
So that's, although it's not illegal, that created a situation where people were calling in, then they were defrauding the public, is what they were doing. So as a result, we looked at all of their records, and over the course of a few years, they had literally hundreds and literally thousands of objects that had come in and gone through their company. Wow. And the W file had the Warden sword in it. Okay, wow. And we were able to locate that at that point, and we saw where they had bought that from this family and sold it to another dealer, and we were able to recover it from the dealer because it's government property. Wow. But interestingly enough, the family that had it from 1932 all the way through all those decades. Wow! And the two brothers, who were the sons of the plebe, they both said, we thought our dad had bought that at a pawn shop in New York City, and that's what he told us, and that we had that sword over our fireplace for 50 years. And so at the end, when they saw the PBS show, where they saw these dealers giving these numbers for these types of antiques, they called the dealers and they sold the sword to them, and then they moved it on.
Good God.
But that was the story of the family. For 50 years, the sword had just sat, over a fireplace, and these two men at that point, had seen it forever, and they didn't realize that their dad had taken it from the Academy.
Well, Bob, some great stories behind all this great investigation work. And first of all, thanks so much for your service to our nation there with the FBI. I want to remind folks that to read more about all these great cases that Bob has worked, you can go to his memoir, Priceless, How I Went Undercover to Rescue the World's Stolen Treasures, and his most recent work, The Devil's Diary, Alfred Rosenberg and the Stolen Secrets of the Third Reich. Well, Bob, thanks again for joining us today. Thanks so much. It's actually great to get to talk to the other Rob Wittman and to have you share with us your experience there at the FBI. So listen, we really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again soon. And folks, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with our next guest right after the commercial break.